Thank you. Thank you for inviting me and us. And I have to say, when I understood that actually Shaul proposed that we come, it was impossible for us to say no. And we completely changed our summer plans and our September plans. We are not in New York now. We are here in Jerusalem. I'm very, very honored to be here. And I was afraid my lecture will be far too long. But now the presentations were like very subtle and reflected. And I feel well embedded to be a bit quick on our points. So actually, I think I should give 3 lectures, and I will also do that, but I will give 3 very condensed and quick lectures. One is on Documenta 15 and how I would call the shift, just like Oliver already did it, how I would call the shift. That is the important shift of Documenta 15 as a shift from representation to infrastructure. And we will talk about that. Then a second part, art, politics, history, in which I want to introduce to you a part of the history of the beginning of the founding of Documenta in the year 1955 that has been researched in the last years by scholars like Miel Redmann and especially also by curators and scholars around the German Historical Museum, in which they showed that many of the organizers of the first Documenta exhibition in 1955 have been Nazis, have either been members of the NSDAP or, like Werner Haftmann, I will talk about it, have even been not only organized Nazis, but even have committed crimes. And in the third part, I address the elephant in the room, and I propose to do it with a timeline. So actually, I propose to go through the events moment by moment. With Galit Elat, we now said, actually, I propose to build an infrastructure of just kind of putting moments like a timeline on the table so that we afterwards can build maybe something with them in the discussion. So this is what I propose to do in the next, let's say, 40 minutes, 10 minutes more or less for each of the 3 parts. So the first part is on Documenta 15, and we have heard so much about it that I can really go quickly. Let's keep the... Yeah. You don't see. Okay, thank you. We have heard about Lumbung. So the main point that I want to claim is that this idea from representation to infrastructure means that in a world in which, as Irit Rogov stated at many moments, in which we are actually not that much anymore governed through representation, in which the fact that we believe in whatever, in the nation, for example, the fact that we believe in the nation is governing us maybe less than the way how we are organized in it, through algorithms and mathematics and grand applications and so on. So in a world in which infrastructure is much more important than, let's say, in the 1970s, and representation less important, the critique of representation is maybe less important, and the critique of infrastructure would be to build other infrastructures. And I think this is what ruangrupa propose. And the way in which they propose it is partly prefigurative, by imagining another world and doing it already now, and partly very concrete economic work, which we can call sharing resources. And by sharing resources, I mean like the concrete economy of money, but also other values, and very much also sharing knowledge as a resource. So we heard about the Majelis, about the way how the sharing of money was actually organized in assemblies and assemblies of assemblies. Another way of this prefiguration is to find other words, naming the world differently, to build a polyphonic vocabulary as a tool to develop new ideas and perspectives. Now, I cannot talk so much about it, but it was really funny. One of the educators of Documenta 15 is actually a philosopher, an analytical philosopher and Wittgensteinian. And she discussed all the time with ruangrupa. She was very angry with their Lumbung and all these kind of words. And she all the time said, what's that? Is this, her name is Jelena Topikov. And she said, what's that? These are just metaphors. And in our discussions, I actually proposed that a metaphor is how let's say economic hegemony, as Oliver would call it, it always establishes itself. So the way how we imagine that the world has to be organized is very much through a kind of metaphor, through ways how it is described. Like, and ruangrupa propose their own vocabulary, and one of the words, for example, is harvest, which means that when we think together, everybody can take notes, everybody can make drawings, everybody can make photos, so that we can use our forms. We can use aesthetics and forms and bring them together in order to take what we know together to a next step. Because together we already know more than what we have learned. Together we already know more than each of us. And by bringing it together and taking it to the next step, ruangrupa propose to work together on another possible world. And they propose to do it through this, they call it harvest. I mean, we could give it also other names, but it's a way to share resources also on the level of knowledge. Composting knowledge is another kind of metaphor. Another strategy, of course, in relation to that and very related to that is learning and unlearning. This is already a concept in Gramsci, you could say. He would say that every relation of education is, every relation of hegemony is actually an educational relation. So we believe we are, let's say, we are governed because we believe also in the way we are governed. And Gramsci already knew that, but we can also unlearn that. We can learn differently. We can start to mistrust the way we are governed by other knowledges. And it's exactly this process of learning and unlearning that ruangrupa also propose. And they do it through the means of art. They do it through aesthetics and forms of learning together and unlearning together. They also do it through challenging archives, we have heard that. Through imagining other practices, we've heard that as well. Through para-institutions. And through production of videos that would actually allow a time and space for an affectivity that might have no space in antagonistic, for example, war situations. So grieving and waiting, I propose, are poetics and politics of video works at Documenta 15 that are neither documentary nor fictional, that actually have the role to create a space of affect in which we can feel something together for which there is no space, for feelings that have no space in the existing power relations. I keep it here because it was so well done. I mean, this could have been like a 1-hour lecture. I keep it here, and we go to the next point. Documenta, art, politics, and history. So the first Documenta happened in 1955. 1955, actually a year in which different exhibitions had also the beginning. The Alexandria Biennial, for example. Sao Paulo Biennial already happened before. It was the first Documenta, and it 1955, 10 years after 1945. In, as we heard, an old museums building. And this museums building in the Fridericianum, in the image of the people, felt completely destroyed. They imagined this Documenta, this first exhibition, like the phoenix out of the ashes of a destroyed town of Kassel, destroyed by the Allied forces, already there's already a certain fantasy of being a victim in this whole idea, a victim of the destruction of the Allied forces, and Documenta is a new beginning in the fantasy of this story. It was organized by the idea of Arnold Bode together with others. One of them was the art historian Werner Haftmann, and here you see the catalog of the first Documenta. I think it's interesting that it is a small d, so Germany invents itself through a small d. And this small d, if you look at it, looks a bit like the B of Bauhaus. So it's kind of the turned around B of Bauhaus, as if in between the B and the D, nothing happened. It was part of a garden show, and it opens with a very highly, let's say highly ideological or narrative or dramatic opening. You have here a wall with two sides before you enter the Fridericianum. On the one side, you see portraits of the artists. If you look at them, you immediately see, I mean, today we see they are men. At that time, this was not that much what people saw. They saw amazing people that they thought they haven't seen before. And they are well dressed. They are all white, of course. And I say of course, because on the other side of the wall, 55, this was also the year of the Family of Men. So you have to imagine a Family of Men, a very important exhibition that recreated humanism in somehow as an ideology. So on the other side of the wall, you have different artifacts from the world, African masks and so on. Of course, while here on this one side of the wall, it is very important that each of these men have a personality and a name. On the other side, you see artifacts without authorship. And yeah, I cannot go too much into detail, but this was in somehow the dramaturgy, that you enter into something completely new that is based on humanism, like the whole world and what it has done, and based on these faces of amazing men that will show you amazing art on the ashes, that will present you the new modernism that has been banned by the Nazis. So Germany can be reborn with a small d, and on the ashes build something new. That's why you see like images like that very often in relation to Documenta. So now there was a conference already for this exhibition, 1955 in Berlin. This exhibition about Documenta 1955 at the German Historical Museum in Berlin. And at this conference, Julia Friedrich gave a lecture that is online. And the title of her lecture was "Modernity is the Best Medicine: How Documenta Helped the Germans to Pass Off the Wounds they had inflicted upon others as their own, and to heal them at the same time." And I mean, I really think with her in that. And the sad thing, if you look now again at this wall, you actually might realize that these men were not only all men and all white, but they were, beside only one, also all not Jewish. And this exhibition claims that it actually takes on the silenced modernity. So this exhibition claims that what is shown here is what couldn't be shown in the Nazi time. It also claims that it shows what has been demonized by the Nazis as degenerated art. Now, if you know the exhibition Degenerated Art, of course, on the catalog was a sculpture by a Jewish artist. And of course, this exhibition was full with anti-Semitism. I mean, it was based on the Nazi ideology of anti-Semitism. Now, we have another German exhibition that says we will rehabilitate what has been called degenerated art. But they rehabilitate only the not Jewish Germans with this exhibition, beside Marc Chagall. actually from whom they show a figurative painting of a Jew that looks like a rabbi. I already talked about these two sides of the entrance hall. So here you have the man, here you have the artifacts of the world, the humankind, let's say. And when you actually enter the door, you will see the Kniende by Wilhelm Lehmbruck, who is actually falling to the floor. So the whole dramaturgy is that you enter and you fall to the floor in order to be reborn. So you go down in order to rise. And so it's important that I'm, of course, not the first person who speaks about that. Already Walter Graskamp talked about it pretty early, I think in the 90s, and this is only a quote from a book that came out in 2018, but the text is older. And here he says about Documenta 1955, not only Otto Freundlich is missing, Otto Freundlich, whose sculpture, The New Man, was on the title page of the catalog Degenerated Art. Also, German Jewish expressionist Ludwig Meidner is missing, Janke Adler, Gerd Wollheim, and many other German Jewish protagonists of modernity. Where is, for example, the self-portrait with Judenpass, I don't translate it because I guess you know what it means, by Felix Nussbaum. So already Walter Graskamp asked this question, but this question didn't come so much in the mind of the people when they thought about the history of Documenta. It could still stand for the rebirth of modernity in Germany. I think that in somehow we can call it an Aryanization of the rebirth of degenerate art. Now, some scholars have been working on that in the last years. Miel Redman, for example, who wrote an article in June 2020, we published it on the NS biographies of the founders of the first Documenta, and Arne Burmann, who worked on the discourse of Werner Haftmann, and then, of course, the exhibition, Documenta, Politics and Art, a very important exhibition at the German Historical Museum. And in this exhibition, we could see that Werner Haftmann, in the year 1946, was actually mentioned in an Italian newspaper in Bologna as the Germanic hyena. So this article says, Nuove accuse contro la iena germanica. So what happened? I mean, Werner Haftmann was not only an art historian in Italy, he was also involved in torturing partisans. So he was very clearly and concretely involved in the Nazi crimes, also at a very late time of the war. And historians at the German Historical Museums worked on that, and then also worked on the fact that he, as an art historian later, discursively and, let's say, art politically, worked on the washing not only of his own biography, but also of the biographies of his fellow artists. For example, Emil Nolde. He was a very important historian of the artwork of Emil Nolde, who himself was found in the last years, was involved in the Nazi, let's say, organization. So, so you could say that this is only a biographical involvement, but this is absolutely not what I claim, and if my lecture would be longer, I could try to show you, and I hope that I showed it already now, this was much more than that on a discursive level. So I would be more interested to show how the exhibition in itself, by its poetics and politics, constructed this new Germanization of modernism. And Werner Haftmann, as the exhibition in Berlin stated, already wrote in 1954, so 1 year before Documenta, in his book, I quote now Werner Haftmann, modern art was declared to be a Jewish invention to decompose the Nordic spirit, although not a single one of the German painters was Jewish. End of quote. So Werner Haftmann believed that Jews were not able to be modern. I think this is important. I mean, I sit down here. To keep this in mind is important because with this exhibition, something came out that we all did not really realize for such a long time. In the art history departments, we didn't discuss it. And now when I go back to the book of Werner Haftmann, now that I know it, I read it in the discourse, and I will work on that much more in the next years, on this discourse from 1880 to 1930, how the German ethnic art, like the Nordic spirit, the German ethnic art and so on, is constructed in the German art discourse from 1880. And Werner Haftmann is very much in this tradition, but we couldn't read it, we couldn't see it. And now we have so much material on the table, and we see it. I think that all these things have an impact on the fact that we now look so closely to the question of anti-Semitism at Documenta, and we should not forget it. And unfortunately, I think that it's easier to claim it when it's not a German, when it's not a German that you would actually accuse when you talk about it. So at the same time, one needs to talk about it. So that's my second part. And now for the third part that is called "And Now, a Timeline of the Discussion about Anti-Semitism and Documenta," I have to tell you that I deeply believe that no timeline is neutral. So I will give you a timeline. I don't think this timeline is neutral. This timeline takes a position. I can tell you what I think the position is. You might read something completely else in it, and maybe I'm wrong and you're right. My position is that I think it makes sense to align facts on the table in order to be able to discuss them. This is why I want to do that. I will more or less just read it, not explain too much around it, because when the explanation starts, we might already come into the debate, and we have time for a proper debate about it with amazing people, Shaul and Oliver, and I would not be alone then. So now I just give you the chronology. On the 7th of May 2019, the German Bundestag adopted a joint motion by the CDU, CSU, SPD, FDP and Bündnis 90 Die Grünen entitled "Resolutely Confronting the BDS Movement, Combating Antisemitism." The Bundestag thus resolutely opposes any form of antisemitism while it is still in its nascent stages, it says, and condemns the BDS campaign and the call to boycott Israeli goods, companies, scientists, artists and athletes. No financial support should be given to organizations that question Israel's right to exist. Regions, cities and municipalities are called upon to join in this stance. This BDS resolution of the German Bundestag is a resolution. So it cannot by police that, but it is a resolution. It stated it. Just like this on the 17th of May 2019. On the 10th of December 2020, a newly built initiative that calls itself Initiative GG 5 Points through Weltoffenheit gives a press conference. And on this press conference, it opposes, I mean, it's founded to oppose to this resolution. And as an opposition, at their press conference, they say, I quote, "Germany's historical responsibility must not lead to the moral or political delegitimization of other historical experiences of violence and oppression, or politically delegitimize other historical experiences of violence and oppression." Now, this is the background of the whole story. It's important because the background is not that old. It starts in 2019. There is a resolution, and there's already in the cultural field an organized counter statement. And these two sides already exist in Germany and in the German media. Now, it was in 2022 when for the first time in the public anti-Semitism was mentioned in relation to Documenta 15. Maybe just quickly I tell you here something about myself. It was already earlier that I realized that all my wishes and proposals of collectives, for example from Jerusalem, were just unheard. They were just not hearable by my colleagues from the curatorial team. But also, I mean, who am I to give them, you know, ideas? So, but I felt that something is in somehow weird. And in Germany, after this 2019, 2020, this feeling of weirdness was there. Yeah? Okay, so on the 7th of January 2022, a so-called Alliance Against Antisemitism publishes a press release under the title Documenta 15, Anti-Zionism and Antisemitism in the Lumbung. The media react, a discussion begins in which many problematic statements were made, which are respectively read as both racist and anti-Semitic. As a reaction, Documenta 15 announces to hold a series of events entitled We Need to Talk, in which representatives of the various conflicting positions would enter into conversation with each other. The choice of speaker is controversial. So, when I say this, I mean, of course, there's a lot happens in between, so you can imagine, you know, they feel like, they feel somehow they need to do something about it, but at the same time, there's a certain political agenda. They think within their agenda, they need to have conflicting positions, but for the Central Council of Jews in Germany, these conflicting positions are not conflicting enough. So they think these are all on the left in somehow. So on the 27th of April, the Central Council of Jews in Germany wrote a letter to Minister Claudia Roth, massively criticizing the announced series of events. And I have a quote here: against anti-Semitism, only clear avowals and even more determined political action at every level of politics, art, culture and society can help. No one, not even in the name of artistic freedom, may absolve themselves of this responsibility, the Central Council of Jews in Germany writes. Some speakers, after this statement, some speakers who were invited to this We Need to Talk thing withdraw, and Documenta cancels the event. On the 9th of May, ruangrupa publishes an open letter on eFlux. Anti-Semitism accusations against Documenta, a scandal about a rumor. This text is full of involvement, let's say, full of involvement in this debate of 2019-2020. Much more full of involvement than ruangrupa would have been involved in this. After this letter, many Jewish organizations in Germany criticized this response of ruangrupa. And after this, on the 29th of May, the group A Question of Funding, which is a group that is very invested in the Palestinian struggle, talks about vandalism in their exhibition venue at Documenta. The exhibition venue is the WH22, so is the name of this place, it's related to the street. And it's interesting because you might have heard about it. You might have heard that there was vandalism. So there was an act of violence against A Question of Funding. Now, what happened was that you could find some tags there. I don't know if you see the photos well, but I wanted to share them with you. This space, WH22, is actually a space in which basement there is a club. and the space is full with graffitis. And we just took some photos of other graffitis in this space. So you see here, for example, this is a photo in the hall when you go from the basement up. And here you see 187. So 187, they claimed, is a death threat against them. Now, 187 actually is related to a paragraph in the US American law. And in this paragraph, thank you, California law, thank you. And in this paragraph, this is actually, yes, about this. But 187 Street Gang is also a Hamburg band. And 187 is a code, a street code. So now you have here the graffiti, most probably with the same spray. Here THC, which stands for cannabis, and here a smiley. This is in the hall of the same building. This is a graffiti in the toilet of the same building, saying Peralta, a word that was also with this P, you can see it still in the space in which A Question of Funding have their exhibition. So I just want to give you these photos to say that there is a certain doubt that this is a death threat. It could be that these are just graffitis, and Oliver and I, when we were there, when we saw the exhibition, later. Yeah. And they call for more security, actually, towards them. They call for more security also from the mayor, who is actually a former policeman, and he took it very seriously. Local and international media report that. So we don't know who did that, but it's at least possible that this was not a death threat. Then you have many media articles that come out, one of them by Leon Kahane, who wants, like me, to relate the debates with the history of Documenta 1955. And is a huge article that is called Responsibility Only in Quotation Marks. Then another one, you might have heard about it, is by Hito Steil, who also wants to bring the context of Germany in. Her text context is everything except when it comes to Germany, is translated into English under the link you can see here. Then on June 18th, the German president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, opens Documenta. He says, quote, "Freedom of opinion and freedom of art are the essence of our constitution. Criticism of Israeli politics is permitted, but where criticism of Israel turns into questioning its existence, the line is crossed." End of quote. So this was at the opening of Documenta. Many people in the art field felt very angry about it. On the 20th of June, anti-Semitic motifs are discovered on an installation by the artist collective Taring Padi on the central Friedrichsplatz in Kassel. The installation is first covered, then removed. On the 24th of June, the New York Times has a huge article about Documenta, saying Documenta was a whole vibe, then a scandal killed the buzz, but is insisting and persisting with the, let's say, ambience and the possibilities and the shift that Documenta 15 might bring forward, just as we heard also today. On June 29th, a panel is organized by Documenta in collaboration with Bildungsstätte Anne Frank with the title Antisemitismus in der Kunst, Antisemitism in Art. And neither ruangrupa as artistic directors of Documenta 15 nor Sabine Schormann, the general director of the institution Documenta, are on the panel. I think this is a scandal, especially after what I have told you about the history of Documenta. So Documenta as an institution has never taken responsibility of the history I have told you. There has never been a public official statement from anyone from Documenta who would say, actually, yes, our institution is inheriting in somehow biographical and discursive Nazi continuities. Then they organize themselves a panel with the title like in collaboration with Bildungsstätte Anne Frank, a panel with the title Anti-Semitism in Art, but they are not speaking themselves. And I know that it was the institution that asked actually ruangrupa not to speak either. On July 6th, Meron Mendel, head of the Anne Frank Educational Institute in Frankfurt, stepped down from his position as a consultant for the exhibition. He stated that the institution did not adequately respond to the anti-Semitism scandal. And as a reaction, Hito Steyer withdraws her work from the exhibition. On July 9th, the case is debated at the German Bundestag. Ade Damawan from ruangrupa gives a speech. The general director of the Documenta institution, Sabine Schormann, did not appear. She just did not go to the Bundestag. On July 16th, Sabine Schormann had to resign from her position as general director after pressure from German politicians. An interim director is appointed, and the shareholders of Documenta GmbH have appointed a committee to provide scientific support in order to analyze works identified or discussed as anti-Semitic, to examine how Documenta 15 deals with anti-Semitic incidents. On September 11, a press release of members of the committee states that, I quote, the serious problems of Documenta 15 consist not only in the presentation of individual works with anti-Semitic imagery and statements, but also in a curatorial anti-Semitic statement. No, I think, but also, sorry, in a curatorial and organizational environment that allowed an anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli mood to prevail. After this came out, and after ruangrupa also met with the committee, they react very angry. And they write a letter. They write an open letter that is published on eFlux, that is addressed to different politicians in Germany. The letter is in somehow, let's say, authored by the Lumbung community and signed by many artists and ruangrupa and parts of the artistic team. And the letter says, we are angry, we are sad, we are united. And a series of posters comes with the letter, and these posters that you see here, the posters are then also part of the exhibition. They are shown, they are printed in the exhibition, they are shown in the exhibition. As a reaction to that, it's translated. They translated themselves, so the asterisk is the translation. They translated as culture of remembrance. And they use the German word because in Germany, culture of remembrance seems to them very important in relation to the Jewish history, to the remembrance of, I think, the murders of the Jews. But I have to say that when I lived in Germany, this Erinnerungskultur, this culture of remembrance lacks a lot of remembrance. For example, the remembrance of the history of the Nazi continuities in Documenta. But yeah, this is what they say. And so these posters are there, and then the public letter is kind of spread widely in the social media and on eFlux. And again, an answer to that comes from the International Auschwitz Committee that calls the letter cynical. This was yesterday, I think. And from the Kassel Jewish community, who also react with the letter, a counter statement in which they say, we are also angry, we are also sad, we are also tired, and we stand together. So it happens that this is the end of my timeline. And exactly, and it happens that now we can say that all together we might be at least tired. I don't know if we are sad and angry, but tired, yes. And I hope that we have the means now to discuss. Thank you very much.